So the School Admissions Bill AB 7, which passed the Assembly at 55-18 and the Senate 30-10, would have permitted but not required schools to give preference to descendants of slavery. The bill, which was believed to be a first of its kind in the U.S., was part of a reparations package published by the Legislative Black Caucus. It would have defined a descendant of slavery as someone directly related to a person who was subjugated to American chattel slavery and was then either freed, classified as a runaway, or served in the military while facing restrictions due to slavery. So, if you think about this, it's basically taking the totality of reparations and piecing it, and trying to piecemeal it through state legislators in order to, eventually build an entire reparations package that's approved. So Gavin Newsom has had a bill that was brought before him, and this bill essentially would make it so that there is heavy consideration in admissions for Black American freedmen. And so I say that distinctly because this is not a bill just for blanketed for all Black people. This is for people who are descendants of the enslaved in this country. And so because of that status, well, then this bill should have been a layup. But it wasn't. So I want to get into this. We're going to get into the nuts and bolts as well. But this really shows that even just this modicum of pushing for something that would actually help Black Americans within the state of California, they actually don't want to do it. And this is not just limited to Democrats. This is also Republicans would do the same thing as well. Let's get into this as well right here, right now. The new California bill ties legacy of slavery to college admissions. Let's get into it. Sorry, I have it muted. Okay.
A California bill that would let descendants of slavery bypass the state's affirmative action ban when applying to college has passed the state assembly and is now heading to the Senate. Democratic Assemblyman Isaac Bryan stated recently that the bill is not about race after it won passage along a party line vote. The bill would not apply to all Black college applicants in California, only to those who could show that they were direct descendants of slavery. The committee staff also noted that some people who identify as white have learned from DNA tests that they are of African descent and may qualify under the bill. The Pacific Legal Foundation, a conservative nonprofit organization, told the San Francisco Chronicle that Bryan's bill was aimed at restoring preferential treatment based on the applicant's race, despite its descendants of slavery language. In 1996, Californians voted for Proposition 209, a ballot measure that stops state colleges and universities from giving preferential treatment to applicants based on race, sex, or ethnicity. 2 years ago, the Supreme Court also outlawed affirmative action at colleges and universities nationwide, saying consideration of an applicant's race or ethnicity is an act of racial discrimination. If the bill clears the state Senate and is signed by Governor Gavin Newsom, the Supreme Court could once again have the final say.
Okay. So let's go over this really quick because I think there's some confusion here because people are saying this has to do with race. It actually does not. So let me go over this really quick. All right. Because I want to make this abundantly clear. So let's go over this.
Assemblyman Isaac Bryan stated recently that the bill is not about race after it won passage along a party line vote. The bill would not apply to all black college applicants in California, only to those who could show that they were direct descendants of slavery. The committee.
So that is the point that a lot of people are missing the piece of, is that when it comes to American freedmen, they are not, this does not apply to all black people. Therefore, it is not a bill that is focused on race. I talked about this with Naheem Way, is that this is actually about status. A status being that you are a descendant of freedmen, which was the name given to black Americans that were of descendants of chattel slavery. And so because they are freedmen, then they would qualify because of what this nation has done to freedmen in the past. And so therefore, this is part of the equalizing taking place within this country. The problem is that a lot of people, when they think slavery, they automatically think 100% black. But just because you're black doesn't mean you're a descendant of chattel slavery in these United States. Now, you could be a descendant of slavery from Jamaica, Trinidad. You could be a descendant of African descent who were enslaved in Brazil. You could be one in Haiti, but that doesn't apply to you because you are a descendant of chattel slavery from who was under France, who was under Portugal. So therefore, or if you were from Jamaica, then it would be under England. So therefore, it would not be owed to you from the United States because your family was not in this country during chattel slavery. And so it's not by race, it is by a status. But the problem is that they're using the race of the people to get around so that they don't have to approve the bill. Because if they were to approve this bill, then this would mean that there would be a raising of the standards for people who have been, besides Native Americans, the most oppressed people in this country. So between us and Native Americans, we have the most oppression out of any group in this country. Historically. For the last, in this country's existence, 250 years, but if you want to talk about the entirety of colonialism on this land, 400, 500 years, right? Go back all the way, to 1492, right? And the hell with Christopher Columbus, he can go kick rocks. He can go kick rocks in hell for all I care. Right? So that's why this bill was crafted and said the way it did, because it was not focused on particularly black people. So let's continue this because I think this is also really important.
Committee staff also noted that some people who identify as white have learned from DNA tests that they are of African descent and may qualify under the bill.
So there are also people who may be white passing, right? Who are freedmen. And a lot of times what ends up happening is you'll have somebody that's white passing because of the rape and sexual assault that has happened to many women who were under the yoke of chattel slavery. And so then they bore children that came from the white enslavers. And so now those kids may have had kids down the line that maybe they intermix with other Europeans and they still have that lineage there. So they may also be qualified for getting not just this bill, right? They also may qualify for reparations as well. This is why it is not a race issue. It is a status issue. And so when people keep saying, oh, well, black people just, no. You got to remember, it is a status issue, not a race issue. And people want to say, oh, this is just about black people. No, but here's the thing. Now, two things can be true at the same time. Yes, most black people who live in this country are victims of slavery. But at the same time, not all black people in this country are victims of chattel slavery under the United States. They may have been victims of chattel slavery from France, Portugal, Spain, England, so on and so forth. Therefore, their claim needs to be met with those respective governments. And though this one is those of us who are under the United States, meaning that we are taking it up with the United States government and also the state governments like California in order to get some type of equalizing to take place within our country. So that's why the language was the way it was. But they're confusing it with race on purpose. They're not dumb. You see how easy it was for me to explain that to you? I don't have a JD. I don't have a law degree. I can explain it. I never even went to college. I can explain it to you. So if I can understand this concept, they can understand this concept. Gavin Newsom can understand this concept, but he doesn't want to. Let's continue on this as well.
Pacific Legal Foundation, a conservative nonprofit organization, told the San Francisco Chronicle that Bryan's bill was aimed at restoring preferential treatment based on the applicant's race, despite its descendants of slavery language.
So they're basically trying to say that he's just trying to get around it. But the thing is, like, if you're doing it just for freedmen, then it's not going to apply to all black people. So look, somebody could be second or third generation Bahamian, and they come here and they're like, yeah, I'm black. They won't qualify. They could be second or third generation Ethiopian. They won't qualify. They could be like, well, I was born here. Yeah, but your parents are not descendants of chattel slavery from the United States. And that lineage can be proven. So if that's the case, then there is no go around here. However, the majority of black people in this country are descendants of chattel slaves, which means there's a lot of black people that would actually get preferential treatment within the state of California. A lot. Because of what the United States has done systematically to those of us who are Black Americans. So let's get into the nuts and bolts in this. And I have my thoughts regarding this bill, but I want to get into nuts and bolts before I give my thoughts. Because when I initially heard this, I asked a few people, what they thought about it. And they have some thoughts too, and I'll share those. I'll recount those with you as well. But here we go. It says Newsom rejects bill giving descendants of slaves preference in college admissions. The measure would likely face legal challenges by opponents of affirmative action. Here's the thing, though. This isn't affirmative action based on race. It wouldn't be. Anyway, let's continue. It says Governor Gavin Newsom delivered a setback to reparations movement in California on Monday, vetoing a bill that would have allowed universities to give slave descendants special consideration in admissions. In a message explaining his decision, Newsom called the bill unnecessary, saying universities already have the authority to determine whether to provide admission preferences to descendants of slavery or other groups. The bill was also likely to have invited legal challenge from opponents. Critics argue it will violate Proposition 209, which prohibits the state's public universities from considering race in admissions, and the 2023 ruling by the U.S. Supreme Court against race-based affirmative action. But like I said, this is not race-based. It is status-based, meaning just so happened that a majority of the people just so happen to be black. But it's not based on their race. It is based on their status of being descendants of people who were enslaved under chattel slavery. And so see how they're trying to mix it? They're trying to mix it together so that they can stop giving anything close to repair whatsoever in this country. This is what they're doing. Let's continue on. It says Newsom decision comes at a time of heightened tensions that the Trump administration has cracked down on diversity initiatives on college campuses by launching investigations and threatening to pull federal funding. In California, Trump has specifically charted UCLA, demanding it pay $1 billion and agreed to a set of reforms to free up more than $500 million in research grants it withheld over allegations of anti-Semitism on campus. Now, of course, we just talked about what's going on in Gaza. Here's the thing. A lot of people may get this confused, but quiet as it's kept, look, speaking against the state of Israel and speaking out against Jewish supremacy and Zionism, it's not anti-Semitic, because we join our voices with other people who are Jewish who also echo the same sentiments as well. And so, therefore, it is not anti-Semitic, but they're trying to use it as a way in order to punish people who are anti-genocide. That's what it basically boils down to. Let's continue on. It says, while the Trump administration threatens our institutions of higher learning and attacks the foundation of diversity and inclusivity, now is not the time to shy away from the fight to protect students who have descended from legacies of harm and exclusion. Says Newsom in his message encouraged universities to review and determine how, when, and if this type of preference can be adopted. Last week, the governor approved a measure citing state agency to administer reparations, and he signed another bill Monday that requires the California State University system to develop procedures to determine who qualifies as a descendant of slavery. But Newsom also vetoed two other reparations-related bills, both from Assemblymember Tina McKinnon. One would have helped victims of racially motivated eminent domain get compensation, and another would have provided home buying assistance to descendants of slaves. This is the second time the governor has vetoed a bill providing redress for Californians who had their property seized. Last year, he declined to sign similar legislation from the state senator Stephen Bradford, citing the lack of an agency to run the program. So the school admissions bill AB 7, which passed the Assembly at 55-18 and the Senate 30-10, would have permitted but not required schools to give preference to descendants of slavery. The bill, which was believed to be a first of its kind in the U.S., was part of a reparations package published by the Legislative Black Caucus. It would have defined a descendant of slavery as someone directly related to a person who was subjugated to American chattel slavery and was then either freed, classified as a runaway, or served in the military while facing restrictions due to slavery. So, if you think about this, it's basically taking the totality of reparations and piecing it, and trying to piecemeal it through state legislators in order to, eventually build an entire reparations package that's approved. So then you have, for instance, right now they're tackling the education aspect, right? Preferential treatment towards American freedmen when it comes to their education. And then you have another one when it comes to home buying assistance. So it's not home buying assistance for Black people. This is home buying assistance for freedmen. And then you have another one where, let's say, they want to do one that is tax breaks, right? Or it could be employment opportunities within municipal, state, or federal government. Things like this, right? Because of the historic harm that's been done that has not been redressed, has not been repaired, it has not been even apologized for. So this is basically, it's like, instead of taking the entire car and shipping it to a place, it's like, okay, we don't have enough space. Okay, we'll take the car apart. First, we're going to transport the tires. They're going to transport, the seats. Then we're going to transport the drivetrain. Then we're going to transport the engine block. Then we're going to transport, the outer body, and then we're going to transport like the computer systems, things like that, right? And then rebuild it once you get it there. So essentially, it's kind of like that. The problem is that they don't want to approve of any of it, even though it is not race-based. It is only status-based. So it says the proposal was backed by the University of California Students Association, which argued it addresses a fraction of the harm done to Black students by systemic discrimination. The California Faculty Association said that the law would provide a critical and necessary option for California's higher education institutions to thoughtfully and appropriately consider a student's lineage as a factor in admissions decisions. So here's the thing. The reason why I kept using the word status is because lineage can be tied to race too, right? This is why status is important, because the thing is, like, it being freedmen is a status based on how your descendants were treated systematically throughout this country, going from slavery to Reconstruction to Jim Crow. And then we had the periods of, the drug war, mass incarceration, so on and so forth. Says that measure, however, was met with questions and concerns from legislative committee staff over how it will be implemented, the number of generations of descendants who will qualify, and how eligibility would be determined. So let's break this down. The measure met with questions, concerns from legislative committee staff over how it will be implemented. So how it will be implemented, that is pretty much, I bet you they can actually come up with a policy that's easy as to how it will be implemented, right? In regards to, because it says the number of generation descendants, like how it will be implemented, like how you're going to find out who's a American descendant of chattel slavery. Well, first of all, we got things like DNA tests. Like, if Maury can find out who the father is, I think that the governments can find out who the father and the mother is, even if the person was adopted, right? There are birth records, right? You can get these information from the vital statistics, and genealogists can come together. You can hire the genealogist to actually help and go through. Some people already know. Like, for instance, my family, I can go back to my 5th great grandfather, who was born in 1792 in these United States in Essex County, Virginia. There's literally a slave plantation with my last name. Come on now. So it's not going to be that hard for a lot of us, a huge chunk of us. You can find that out. There are literally records where it goes, oh, well, this person who is a descendant of this person, and they're not Negro, they're mulatto. Well, why in the hell would they be mulatto? So they may be somebody that's lightish, that, they kind of high yellow, like we used to call it. Or in the South, they call them red bone. Light skin, for those who are not initiated. But it's not that hard to find out. Like, if Ancestry.com can do it, If 23andMe can do it, if all these other ones can do it, you mean to tell me that the United States government, or even the governments of like California, Florida, South Carolina, Mississippi, Georgia, Virginia, you mean to tell me that they can't do it? And now it says the number of generations of descendants who will qualify. I mean, you go until the repair is done. You go until the repair is done. Like, why are we sitting here going, oh, how many generations? Well, we're gonna have to go all the way back up until now. And then the new generations until the repair is fully done. Once the repair has fully been implemented, then that could be where it cuts off. And people can go, well, that will cost us a lot of money. Well, y'all should have repaired us a long time ago then. Hey, hop to it, guys. Time is running out. That's the thing, though. A lot of times people will say, well, we can't afford this. I'm like, y'all can afford giving tax breaks to all these billionaires. Y'all can look. This is California, y'all. How many billionaires live in California? First of all, second of all, in 2020, I think it was in March, Congress approved and dumped $4 trillion into the markets to help keep the corporations above water. $4 trillion. Now, I think it's in Dr. Sandy Darity's book, From Here to Equality, I think it's somewhere estimated close to around $20 trillion. If they can do $4 trillion in 1 year, that means that they only need 5 years in order to fully pay back reparations to freedmen. 5 years. Oh, we can do $4 trillion for 5 years. We can do $4 trillion each year for 5 years. If you're, oh my God, that's so much money. I'm like, well, I guess we need to cut the military budget then. I guess we need to stop giving subsidies to big pharma. I guess we need to stop giving subsidies to the military-industrial complex. I guess we need to stop giving subsidies to these billionaires and big tech companies. I guess no more Palantir. I guess Amazon is not going to be getting that tax break anymore. I guess they're going to have to pay up. I guess we're going to have to break up banks like Wells Fargo, and we have to break up insurance companies like Aetna, because they're the ones who literally owe us basically the entirety of the worth of their companies. If we're really going to get down about it. People are like, how we can afford it? Look, first of all, if you're white and you're poor, or even if you're white and slightly affluent, you ain't got nothing that we going to take from you. What do you got? Are you actually a descendant of enslavers? Do you have that generational wealth that you're sitting on? No? Then, it don't apply to you. That's the thing. And people get worried because why are you worried? It has nothing to do with you. Oh my God, the country's going to go bankrupt. Guess what? We're going bankrupt right now by giving all these tax breaks to these billionaires. Might as well give it to working class freedmen. A majority of us are working class anyway. That money is going to recirculate and come back into the economy. It's going to come back to y'all anyway. But that's the crazy part. It's wild, man. It's wild. Anyway, I don't want to go off on a tangent, even though I just started. But this is basically the nuts and bolts. And the fact that Gavin Newsom did this, it just shows that really neither party really has any type of solidarity or any type of will or want or desire to really repair the stain of slavery that they have continued to allow to take place within this country. All right. Looking at what they have, allowed to continue. Like, for instance, Joe Biden with the 94 crime bill. That was They sat by and watched that happen. One of the only people that actually said something, even though he still voted for the bill, was Bernie Sanders. He was like, "Well, I'll sign it for the Violence Against Women Act, but this bill is going to be detrimental to Black people." And please don't come in the comments and be like, "Well, the Congressional Black Caucus, they agree," but they were wrong. They were wrong. They fell for the okie doke. Black people in the past, they could be wrong too. Look, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. himself said, "I fear I may have brought my people into a burning house." He recognized, yeah, maybe I was a little bit misguided in some things. That's okay to acknowledge that. The Congressional Black Caucus was wrong. As we can see today, the Congressional Black Caucus is really a bunch of turncoats that actually don't give a damn about Black people. They just want to collect that check. And I say this also to the people who are in MAGA cult, who are also Black, who also are just trying to sell us out for a check too. This is why I say both parties are trash, because they don't give a damn about us in the first place. And so now my opinions about this bill. I've seen many people who have responded to this. Some people who are from the ADOS Foundation, some of them thought that it was a good thing, or it was measurably good. Some others, like people like Naheem Way, said that this was not it. This is basically them just throwing crumbs. This is basically just crumbs. I asked other people, like for instance, I asked Roger Meadows and I asked my sister Sabby Sabs, and they were like, it's not really reparations. It's just for college admissions. Like, because number one, you got to think, not all Black people go to college. Number one. Number two, not all Black people are going to go to college, because college is not for everybody. So how is this going to affect freedmen across the board? It's not. It's only going to affect freedmen who live in California, who's going to go to college there. And it's not a requirement. It just opens up for them to be able to use it as a consideration. So therefore, it is crumbs. So my thoughts about that bill, this was crumbs. This was a half of a half of a half measure. And even then, the Democratic Party, people like Gavin Newsom didn't want to do it. So to anybody who's Black American who thinks that the Democratic Party stands with us, they want you to remain in their party just so they can continue to use you. You are a token. You are a token to them. And it is time for Black people to stop accepting crumbs. No more. If you really think that the way to Black liberation is through either one of these parties, I have a big, beautiful diamond encrusted bridge over an active volcano to sell you. Prime real estate. But here's the problem. We're conditioned to be in this, under the yoke of both parties like this. We're conditioned. And so ultimately what needs to happen now is that we need to open our eyes and realize that Black liberation will never come from either one of these parties. And Black liberation will come from the bottom up through completely changing the system. And remember, the system that has kept us like this is two things: white supremacy and capitalism. And capitalism uses white supremacy to keep itself alive. So why in the hell would I embrace a system that has subjugated our ancestors in order to try to make it in this country. I might as well dig up my ancestors' graves and slap them in the face. I'm not going to do that. I have too much honor and respect for them. I'm not going to embrace a system that subjected them to chattel slavery. I honestly do think that we as Black people need to run, not walk, run from capitalism. Because it's the reason why we're in this situation right now. So this bill, while it was a half of a half of a half measure, was really telling. Because this showed us exactly who the Democratic Party is. So it's exactly who Gavin Newsom is. And guaranteed, if a Republican was governor in California, same thing would have happened. Because I definitely don't see somebody like Ron DeSantis ever going for that. They won't. And so this is why it's so important for us to really unite and push for a system that is favorable to all, but especially favorable to giving repair to the most marginalized among us. Thank you so much for watching, and I appreciate it from the top and bottom of my heart. If you'd like to see any more, you can look here.